Hello everyone and welcome back to Mixing Continents. Today I'll take you on a journey through the Blue Mountains, a beautiful mountain range littered with wild forests and spectacular landscapes, just 2 hours west of Sydney. Here I came up with a drink called the Katoomba Punch, and for those of you new to the channel, this is a series called No Bars in the Wild. Throughout the series, I travel across continents hunting for native ingredients and local spirits to use in my drinks. The goal is to explore the world through cocktails and make drinks where no bartender has before, all inspired by the world around me. In future episodes, I'll take you up a few of Indonesia's most spectacular volcanoes, caves and canyons to gather more ingredients, so subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with what's been going on. If you watched my last video, I was just in Albury on the border of New South Wales, and I beelined straight to the mountains. Annoyingly, whilst I was here in Australia, they were doing rail works on the lines between Melbourne and Sydney, so I had to take an overnight bus once again. And it was packed since there was no trains running, so I got no sleep, and it took me about 8 hours to finally get to Katoomba, the main town in the mountains. And I was exhausted and still pretty run down from Melbourne, so I planned on wasting the first day and heading straight to the hostel to get some sleep. But on the way there, I must have been about 100 meters away and I get this call, and this is quite possibly one of the best calls I've ever received. It was an old travelling buddy of my grandparents from over 40 years ago who just happened to get in touch at this very moment, and I mentioned to her that I just arrived up in the mountains. And she came back with the fact that she had an unused wooden cabin in the next town along in Wentworth Falls, so I hopped straight in a cab and made use of this isolated cabin all to myself for the next 5 days. The universe does work in amazing ways. Over the next few days I was just trying to get inspired, so I explored the area as much as I could. So I visited the Three Sisters, a famous rock formation in the Blue Mountains on the north side of the Jameson Valley. It's located on the edge of Katoomba and is one of the Blue Mountains' best known sites. The commonly told legend from the Aboriginal tribes is that the three sisters who lived in the Jameson Valley as members of the Katoomba tribe fell in love with 3 men from the neighbouring Nepean tribe. But marriage was forbidden by tribal law, so the brothers, not happy to accept this, decided to capture the three sisters, and a major tribal battle ensued. The three sisters were turned to stone by an elder to protect them, but he was killed in the fighting, so no one was able to turn them back. And what a beautiful story that is. Anyway, I also visited Minnehaha Falls, which is a beautiful short hike on the opposite side of town, which takes you down a river and along some cliff edges, where you'll find an amazing swimming spot at the base of the waterfall. And the following day I went to Blackheath, a neighbouring town, and took a hike deep into the mountain range which followed the cliff edges for about 8 kilometers. And it was a beautiful hike, and even found an amazing spot to stop for breakfast. But it was pretty sketchy, and for about 3 kilometers there was nothing but a bush on your right and a 500-meter drop on your left. But it did bring you to the Grand Canyon Trail, which is a spectacular hike. You have to walk down below the canopy at the base of the mountains and you'll find a lush hidden rainforest within the canyons. And you can follow this trail for another 8 kilometers through a diverse range of plant life and animals, and even under waterfalls. And during these few days of hiking I was trying to keep an eye out for something I can use in my drinks. But to be honest, I did find a few potential ingredients, but I wasn't confident enough to know whether picking them was a good idea or not, so I went without. But fortunately in Katoomba there's quite a few fruit markets and health food stores I could check out to grab some ingredients, so I went on the hunt. I also tried to find a local spirit that I could use, and there was a local gin distillery in the mountains, but they didn't sell any miniature bottles, and on my traveller's budget I couldn't afford a 75cl, nor did I want to finish one as I was leaving to Indonesia in a week. So I opted for a cheaper Australian rum that I was able to find in a 200ml bottle. But back to the fruit markets. After having a walk around I couldn't find anything that was completely new to me, but they did have a huge array of fruits grown and produced within Australia. And again, these markets are crazy, and I'll say it once more, you won't be able to find anything like this back in the UK. So I picked up a fair amount. I got some Queen Garnet plums, some October Sun plums, a large Australian pomegranate, a Kensington Pride mango, an Australian guava, Australian apple, and my new favourite fruit, finger limes. Over the next few days it did start to rain, so I didn't feel fully comfortable going hiking around the cliff edges to find a good spot, so I decided, since I have some time and space in the cabin as well as access to a working kitchen, I would make it here on a terrace. And what a beautiful spot it is. It faces towards Katoomba, and look how amazing the sunsets are from here. As well as this, over the last few evenings I was working on building a relationship with these little guys, and they even flocked to me when I was making this drink, which was a pretty amazing experience, and I don't think I would have been as lucky if I was actually out on a trail. So to begin making the Katoomba Punch, I started preparing all the different components for this drink. The first part is the syrup. For this I'm using Queen Garnet plums and some local honey I found in the cupboard to make a plum and honey syrup. I sliced up the plums, cooked them off with about a cup of water to extract as much flavour as possible, and then added 4 tablespoons of honey, so roughly a 2-to-1 ratio, as I didn't want it too sweet as I'm using quite a few ingredients with a lot of natural sugars. Then I just bottled it up and left it to chill. For the next set of ingredients I'm using 3 different juices: pomegranate, mango and October Sun plums. I started off with the mangoes. For this I scraped out all of the flesh, and mashed it up in a bowl, and then ran it through a sieve to separate the pulp and the juice, as I'll be using it later on for my garnish. Next is the plums, so I chopped these up and removed the stones, and I tried to muddle them, but it didn't really go to plan, so I ended up doing the tedious task of grating them, which worked out pretty well, so again, ran it through a sieve and bottled it up. Next is the pomegranate juice, which is definitely the easiest one to work with, so I removed all of the seeds and placed them in a shaker and went at it with a muddler once again. Then I strained and bottled, and I also saved a few seeds for later. And the only liquid left to prep is the spirit, which I'm going to infuse with the Australian apple and guava. So I chopped these up and placed them in a mason jar and gave them a little muddle and topped it off with the bundaberg rum, sealed it up and hid it away. So now I'll use some of the leftovers from earlier to make the garnish. As I wasn't making this in a while anymore, I thought I'd go a little bit over the top. So for this, I took the mango pulp and flattened it over some foil. I would have used baking sheets, but I couldn't find any in my local store. Anyways, placed these in the oven at the lowest heat possible, and whilst it was doing its thing, I was entertaining the guests on this lovely rainy afternoon, and decided to name them. So I'd like to introduce you to Sally and Bruce. But back to the prep. Once the mangoes were ready, I cut them into shape and put them to the side. I also took some of the leftover apple and made some small squares, and I really loved the colour of the skin, so I wanted to incorporate this somehow. So I peeled some off and cut a few strips, and then dehydrated it in the oven. Next, I did the same with the Queen Garnet plums. I used the apple squares for reference, as I'll be laying them on top of each other. And for the final component, I also dehydrated some of the plum and grinded it down using the pestle and mortar until I got a nice crumb which I'll use to rim the glass. So with everything ready, I set up a little bar out on a terrace with an amazing view of the valley between Katoomba and Wentworth Falls. And just to run over the ingredients again, we have mango juice, pomegranate juice, plum juice, the plum and honey syrup, but I did drink some earlier in an iced tea, hence why half of it is missing, the apple and guava infused rum, and also these limes. But as you'll learn watching the next set of videos, I have this thing of always forgetting something, as my brain is still getting used to braining having to film and make drinks at the same time. And for this drink, I forgot to add the limes. But to be honest, it still works nicely as the pomegranate juice is really sharp and its acidity ended up balancing out the drink pretty well. But they did come in handy to help rim the glass at least. So as usual, when adding a rim, just coat the edge of the glass with a lime or lemon wedge, and rub along the powder or crumb until it evenly coats the rim. And then add ice and let the glass chill. Now I'll begin by adding everything to the shaker. So starting with 25 milliliters of mango juice. And it turns out fresh juice is pretty thick, so I'm going to remove the speed pourer and carry on. Now the same with the plum. 25 milliliters of the October Sun plum juice. And 45 milliliters of the pomegranate juice. Next is 15 milliliters of the honey and plum syrup. And finally 60 milliliters of the apple and guava infused rum. So now that everything's in, it's time to add the ice and shake her up. And of course, replace the ice in double strain to make sure the drink comes out nice and smooth. And as you can see, Bruce and Sally are really curious as to what's going on. Finally, for the garnish, I placed the dehydrated mango pulp across the top, and placed 3 towers of apple and plum to represent the 3 sisters. I probably should have removed that bit of ice that's sticking out, but oh well. Next, a few pomegranate seeds. And we're going to finish this bad boy off with a delicate placement of some finger limes. Honestly, these things are so cool. They're fresh, vibrant, and it's like God designed them to be a garnish. Just imagine them on top of a cheesecake. Unreal. Anyways, the last piece of the puzzle is some dehydrated apple skin. And boom, that's it, the Katoomba Punch. Fresh, vibrant, punchy. I wouldn't recommend making this in a bar, as it's got a bit too much going on, but I wanted to have some fun with this one. And Bruce even popped over to check it out. And this was completely unplanned, but look, they're matching. After giving it a try, of course it's super fruity. You initially get the burst of sweetness from the mango and the honey plum syrup. The fresh mango juice almost gives this drink a creamy texture as it was so thick. Then you get the sharp tang from the pomegranate juice, which balances out the rest of the flavours. And the lime juice would have worked well too had I remembered to put it in, but honestly I don't think this drink needs it. It's also quite heavy on the plum flavour as I used it in 3 different ways, but not at all overpowering, as it's actually quite a refreshing change as I don't usually come across plum-based cocktails all too often. And the rum itself has a sweet, crisp complexity from the apple and guava, and all in all, a very refreshing rendition of the classic rum punch. And the garnish is also a lovely treat. I'm a fan of having a snack for the garnish, and this provides a whole variety of flavours and textures that complement the drink very well. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed my adventures through the Blue Mountains and maybe learnt a thing or two along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to help a brother out, like, comment and subscribe, and remember, there's no bars in the wild.